Welcome back to Southwest Yard and Garden. I'm John White. Today we're going to be talking about a new segment on the show, and that is the monthly checklist. And what we're going to do on the monthly checklist is let you know of either cultural practices, things that be planted, maybe things that need to be done at that time. There might be a certain insect pest or disease that might need to be looked at or looked for or maybe controlled at that time of year. So those are some of the things we're going to try and bring out to you. Of course, our time is short, so we can't list everything that needs to be done for the month. So we're going to highlight some of the major things that people should be doing for the month. So let's start off with here February checklist. We're going to be looking at planting new plant material in our yards. The way plant material comes is as container stock, and these can be either plastic or clay or sometimes a kind of a paper mache plantable pot. These have soil in them, and then the other way is with a bare root stock, and sometimes these will be in little plastic bags. They're basically just some peat moss inside, but the plant is basically without any soil. The peat moss is just there to keep the roots wet. We want to make sure that the roots are moist, that they have not dried when we plant it. Other ways we find them sometimes in nurseries where they're healed into a kind of a sawdust pit, and the plants are brought out, but what bare root means is there is no soil on the roots, and there's special ways to handle that. And then one of the other ways is with our balled and burlap stock, and you can see this pine tree has the burlap around it. It does have a pot just to hold it together, and sometimes you can buy them without the pot and just the burlap. It'll have wire around it. Of course, those need to be removed off of it when the plant is planted. But these are the three ways that a lot of our nursery plant material is planted. But this is the time of year to get a lot of that dormant nursery stock planted, and so that's one of our tips for the month. One of the other things that we can be doing this month is finishing up some of our pruning work on some of the dormant season plants. One of the things that we do want to point out when we're pruning is have a purpose for pruning. And what we like to take out is diseased and damaged limbs, limbs that might be rubbing against another limb. We want to take those out. On young trees like this one, what we're doing here is training the tree, and not so much pruning it, but it's more of a training type cut. And so on young trees, we like to get rid of some of the interfering branches and try and develop the permanent scaffold branch work. And large established limbs, hopefully you've already done the good training work on it, and you don't need to do a lot of heavy pruning on it. But one of the major points on pruning is that when we do cut, we want to make a cut at the branch collar. And the branch collar on this particular tree would be just in front of the trunk on the tree here. You can see there's a little bit of an area here we call a branch bark ridge, and the collar is right around here. So if we were going to cut this off, we would make the cut there. As you can see up here, there's a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a wrinkled part of the bark right here. That's kind of where the bark collar is there, and that's where we would want to make our cut if we were taking that limb off. So that's very important because the cuts will heal much faster if you make the proper cuts. If you make a flush cut where you're taking it off just even with the trunk, that's very slow to heal. So we'd like to get our pruning done on dormant wood trees sometime here pretty quick in the next month to 6 weeks. This is again for the southern part of the state because a lot of the trees will be starting to get some bud swell on them and stuff coming up next month. So we'd like to get that done and get those trees taken care of. Another big item in February is rose pruning, and this is a Floribunda rose, but our hybrid teas, Floribundas, grandifloras, and some of our miniatures we want to get pruned this month. And what we're doing is getting them cleaned up and kind of getting the canes that we want to keep established and get the rose in condition so it has a good growth on in the spring, and you'll have a nice bloom on it for the spring, early summer period. The climbing roses, we do not want to prune at this time of year. We're going to let the climbers go ahead and bloom and then prune them after they bloom. So that's the one exception on pruning roses. So if you have climbers, you want to wait on that. But some of our shrub roses, we want to go ahead and prune them. We want to establish about three to four good canes. We want to leave the centers open. We'll prune them somewhere around, depending on the actual rose, somewhere around 12 to 18 inches, maybe 24 inches on some of the grandifloras, and then establish those good canes on the inside of it, and that'll help the rose a lot. It'll give it a lot extra bloom and hopefully some larger blooms on it. So, but February is the time to do the pruning on those roses, so we want to get that done this month. A couple other things that you can be doing this month. One is, in the southern part of the state, is making a selection on a pre-emergent herbicide. And what we're doing here is picking a weed control product that will kill the weed from seed. So it's called pre-emergent. You're putting it on prior to the emergence of the seed. And latter part of this month, first part of next month is a good time to put the material on for the warm season weeds. So those will be the weeds that are real problems during the summer. The weeds that we have right now are cool season weeds, and those came up last fall, and so these materials are not going to work on those. So what we're talking about is the warm season weeds, and don't bother with the particular product here. There's a lot of different products. What you want to do is select the material based on the type of weeds that you have and the plants that you're trying to control. Here's another material. It's in a liquid form. Again, you need to be sure and read the labels to make sure those products can be used on your particular site and the type of weeds that you're trying to control, because these do not control every last weed, so you do need to keep that in mind. Another thing that we can do this time of year is dormant oil sprays on some of our fruit trees and maybe some of our ornamental trees, especially if they have scale insects on them. And the scale insects are a tiny sucking insect that hides under a hard shell, and it does a lot of the feeding on the plant and is protected by that shell. Well, the dormant oil, also called horticultural oils, are a material that can be used. Use them according to direction, but this time of year is one of the time of years that you would like to use the dormant oil. If you have some type of bacterial or maybe some kind of fungal disease problem, also a lot of times you can add a fungicide or a bactericide to that material, but you do need to do an adequate job of spraying the entire tree so that you have thorough coverage. But again, be sure and read the labels, make sure that it can be used on those particular products. I hope you enjoyed our new segment. It will be shown at the first part of each month, and again, we don't have very much time to cover all the subjects that need to be covered for that month, so we're going to highlight some of the major ones. But again, I hope you've enjoyed our new segment and watch for it at the first of each month.